everyone, it's Michelle back again with another episode of Case Me a Christmas card for this year. So this is the card I'm going to be making today, and what it has is some gold embossing over a watercoloured background. So I'm starting with some Canson watercolour cardstock here, watercolour paper. I've cut that down to a more manageable size. And I've got out my Gansai Tambi watercolours here. I'm going to be using 4 different colours from this watercolour set. I actually added water to more than what I was actually going to be using. So I'm actually going to be using the 4 colours Pale Aqua, Cornflower Blue, Blue and Cobalt Blue. I actually had put water in the purple one as well, but I didn't end up using that one. Anyway, so I'm just using my big flat brush here to spread some water all over this watercolour paper before I start adding some colour. And there's absolutely no rhyme or reason to this. I'm just adding splotches of colour wherever. I just wanted the whole background to be completely covered in various different shades of these blues and greens. I wasn't that concerned if there were heaps of white space. I wasn't that concerned if I had more of one colour than another. I just wanted to get the colour down. I did tend to add a little bit less of the darker colour than the paler colours at this stage, because I knew that I would be adding a little bit more of the darker colours at the next sort of stage of this panel. So it looks like an absolute hot mess, but that doesn't matter at this point in time. And I then decided that I wanted to add a little bit of gold. So I pulled out my Starry colours set, also from Gansai Tambi, and I'm using the yellow gold colour from this set. I didn't want to add a heap of this because I didn't want all of the panel to look green, and if I added heaps of the gold on top of the blue, I thought that's risk of it actually turning just all green instead of recognisably having bits of gold and bits of blue and bits of green. So just a few little splats here and there. Alright, and I used my heat tool to just dry that off, make sure it was dry from the front and the back. Now my guest today is my friend Natalie Walsh, and another Melbourne card maker, and this is the card that I'm casing today. So Nat used the same technique that I'm using now. She started with a panel of watercolour cardstock and put Gansai Tambi watercolours over it, and then she did some gold embossing over the top. Now after that, what she did was different to what I did, but the base layer, the background, is pretty much using the same technique. So here I am just prepping my panel for some gold embossing. So I'm just using a powder tool to completely cover that panel, and then I'm adding some Versamark ink to my stamp. So I'm using the Christmas Rose Bold Prints stamp from Hero Arts, and making sure that I have some good coverage to make sure all of that ink transfers across onto the watercolour paper. I never know whether to call it watercolour paper or watercolour cardstock, because it is heavy like cardstock, but most people refer to it as watercolour paper. Tell me what you call it in the comments below. Alright, so I'm adding some gold embossing powder, and this is from Hero Arts again. I'm just making sure, and you can see I need another tub of this. I don't have very much of it left, so I foresee a Hero Arts order coming up in my near future. All right, and I'm just using my heat tool to make sure that is all melted, and I've got some lovely gold embossing on there. Now, to make the image stand out, make the stamping stand out a little bit more, I went back to my Gansai Tambis, and I'm adding some of the darker blue colours. So the blue and the cobalt blue, I'm concentrating just on those colours right now. And I'm just adding those colours to the petals of the larger flowers. I'm ignoring the smaller flowers, and I'm adding the same colours to some of the larger leaves. So the leaves attached to those flowers, and also the holly leaves that you can see in various different parts of this image. So I just wanted the image to sort of stand out a little bit more, and so making them have a little bit more contrast with the background just brought those images a little bit more into view, made them easier to spot. Okay, so I'm just taking my time to add, and I'm not being really super careful with it. I didn't want it to look really, really fussy. I sometimes use this technique of doing a bit of a random background, then stamp and then colour in the image, but I quite often use Copic markers to do it. I decided for this one I would just stick with the watercolour, so I wanted it to look a little bit more loose than if I had used Copic markers. Okay, so I'm just checking to make sure I've coloured in all of the leaves that I wanted to colour in. I actually think I missed one or two, but that doesn't matter. And yeah, just making sure I've got some nice deep colour. Some of them looked a little bit watery, so I'm just adding a little bit more colour here and there to bring them out. And again, with the heat tool to make sure it is nice and dry before I move on to my next step. So one thing I find with these watercolours is sometimes if you add a little bit more of the colour, you do get a bit of a sheen to it. So there are a few bits here and there that I thought, oh, it looks still wet, but it wasn't. It was just the look that these particular paints give you. All right, so I decided on the card that I was going to make, I wanted there to be a little border around it. So this is another way that my card is echoing Natalie's card. She put a little thin dark border around her coloured panel. I decided to use some gold around my coloured panel. So I pulled out this gold cardstock. Now, I don't even know if you can get this cardstock anymore. I got this many, many years ago. It's called Lustrelux cardstock. I got it from a paper provider that doesn't. I don't think they even sell to the public anymore. I think it's just for people in the actual business of printing. Anyway, I've never seen it anywhere else, so I don't think you could get it. But it is a beautiful gold. It is sort of matte, but still metallic. It's certainly not mirror cardstock, but I didn't want it to be mirror because then it would shine a bit more than the embossing. Now, because I am sticking down watercolour cardstock, which is a little bit textured and it was a bit warped from the water, and I'm sticking it to a metallic cardstock, I pulled out the big gun of adhesive, which is my ATG gun from Scotch. Because I find that the adhesive in this particular the stickiness of the adhesive is just super duper. Once it's stuck, it's not going to budge. So it's really useful if you're sticking something that sometimes comes loose. Okay, so I decided I just wanted to put a big sentiment right in the middle on this background and not do much else to it. So I used a little bit more of my metallic gold cardstock and a little bit of white cardstock as well. And I cut out this Merry Christmas text die from Paper Rose Studio, which is one of my favourites. Honestly, I really like the font in this one. So I'm just being super careful to push out all of the little bits in between the letters with this one, and making sure I know exactly where the little dot on top of the I for Christmas ends up, because the number of times I have made cards with a die that has a lowercase I in it and I lose the dot on the I, and that just drives me bonkers. So I was very careful with this one, but then it popped out anyway. So right now I'm just using some liquid glue. This liquid glue is from Paper Rose, and adhering the gold word die cut to the white shadow behind it, and I decided there was so much detail in this card, I didn't really want to pop it up any further than that, so I just adhered that straight to the card, my patterned panel that I've made. Yeah, so straight on. And then you'll see that there's a little bit that is missing there, see? That little negative space is really helpful for figuring out exactly where the dot on the eye is going to go. So I pop that back into place, put a little drop of glue, and then put the dot in the eye back into place before removing that sort of negative space, so I knew exactly where it was going to go. All right, and there is my card finish. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a close-up view so you can see all the shine, not just from the embossing and from the gold cardstock, but also from the watercolor in the background as well. Thanks very much for watching today, and we'll see you again next time. Bye.